Oops, we're going to go for me first. No, we're going to go for me first. There we are. Hello, I'm Ray Jones, and yes, I'm afraid you've got me for at least 1 minute before you get Catherine talking to you. I'm just going to do a quick few housekeeping things. In case you should by now not be hearing any music. If you're still hearing music, I would see a doctor, because I think it's stopped. If you should be able to hear me, the voice. If you're not, send some message on the chat room. If you want to send a message on the chat room, it's down there below. You can type away. And if you do have questions or comments while we go through Catherine's presentation, please type them as you go, as you think of them. But Catherine will take all the questions and comments at the end in a group. I know we've got people from Bournemouth. We've got people from Edmonton in Canada. Hi, Rashid. We've got some staff members from Plymouth, Chris Hanks and Tim Jenkinson. We've got some students, Vicky, hello. And we've got Emmanuel Feature, professor in the Faculty of Technology. Hi, Emmanuel. So we'll go over to Catherine now. Just one more word about if the chat room seems to freeze or everything seems to freeze, there's a little note above my head there saying press F5. So if things seem to freeze, press F5 and just come back into it again. So without further ado, we'll go over to Catherine.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this webcast. I'm Catherine Hennessy and I'm a gerontologist in the School of Nursing and Community Studies here at Plymouth, where I'm working on a number of research projects having to do with the well-being and quality of life of older people. With Plymouth being in the southwest, which has the oldest population structure of all the regions in England, as well as being a very rural region, a lot of my work has to do with older people in rural areas. What I'm going to talk about this afternoon is a large-scale research project on rural aging, which I'm heading up, which has just been funded under the New Dynamics of Aging program, or what I'll be referring to as the NDA, which is a unique collaboration among 5 of the UK research councils. What I want to do is to first describe a bit of the background of the NDA program, and then to explain something about the development and the content of our new project on rural aging. For those of you who may not be familiar with the New Dynamics of Aging program, it is one of several multi- and interdisciplinary research initiatives that are currently being co-sponsored by a number of the UK research councils. And all these initiatives have been developed in recognition of the fact that a complex process or phenomenon like aging is best approached through the perspectives and methods of multiple disciplines, as well as the need to add value to existing streams of aging research. The UK has some of the world's foremost researchers in the field of aging, and yet oftentimes various areas of research are not as well articulated as they could be in reference to one another. So in order to avoid duplication of some of these areas or reinventing the wheel, the research councils have taken the initiative to develop these explicitly interdisciplinary programs of research. Another factor has to do with promoting better coordination between various research funding bodies on aging in the UK. Not only the research councils themselves, but also organizations like the Stroke Foundation and the British Heart Association and others which have major programs of research on aging. And then finally, there's the recognition that there can be better coordination between researchers in the field of aging and research end users, as well as between researchers and end users to maximize the practice and policy impact of this research. Now, these interdisciplinary programs on aging research are similar to other efforts that are currently ongoing in places like the U.S., where the National Institute on Aging has identified priority areas which necessitate interdisciplinary approaches, such as biodemography and neuroscience, and which are being funded in terms of providing expanded training in these areas and funding of networks of aging researchers. In Finland, closer to home, there have been a couple of large multidisciplinary aging research programs since the 1980s. The latest one has involved disciplines ranging from neuroscience to architecture. The NDA likewise covers a pretty vast disciplinary terrain under the remits of the 5 participating research councils, including the Economic and Social Research Council, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, the Medical Research Council, the Research Council having to do with biotechnology and biological sciences, and also the Arts and Humanities Research Council. The program began in 2006 and has a budget of over £20 million at this point, making it the largest program of aging research fielded to date in the UK, and it will last for 7 years. The NDA has 2 major themes and related sub-themes, which are intended to reflect the processes and context of contemporary aging. And these are, first, aging well across the life course, so using an explicit life course perspective on aging processes, which is already well established in areas such as epidemiology, and looking at related sub-themes of active aging, for example, autonomy and independence, transitions in later life, and looking at the oldest old. The second theme has to do with aging and its environment. And the sub-themes under this major theme have to do with resources for aging, locality, place and participation, the built and technological environment, and finally the global dynamics of aging. And as you'll see as we go along, our research project relates to several of these areas. Now, while the NDA explicitly focuses on the participation of multiple disciplines in the research program, as Alan Walker, who is the NDA program director, has repeatedly stated, almost as a mantra, the NDA program is not about interdisciplinary research for its own sake. And in fact, proposals have had to very rigorously demonstrate how the different disciplinary perspectives will each contribute to a substantive understanding of the research problem and how they will explicitly benefit aging research and improve the quality of life of older people. The proposed research is required to specifically state how it will cross the remits of at least 2 of the participating research councils. And finally, applicants have had to give very detailed accounts of how the collaboration of multiple disciplines will be operationalized, as well as the interdisciplinary nature of the investigation, including innovative methodologies and potential contributions to theory building in gerontology. Now, one of the major barriers to conducting interdisciplinary research that scientists consistently point to is the extended planning phase that's often necessary for this type of working, especially when the participating disciplines have little previous history of intellectual collaboration. So in order to support the kinds of planning tasks necessary for incubating, if you will, multi and interdisciplinary teams to develop research bids to the New Dynamics of Aging program, in 2006, the NDA funded 11 so-called preparatory networks for periods of up to a year to support these activities. And the sole requirement of these preparatory networks is that they put together and submit a bid for a large-scale so-called collaborative research project to the New Dynamics of Aging program. And there were quite a range of topics that were covered in the 11 networks. You can see a full description of these on the New Dynamics of Aging website, and the web address is given there. But they covered things from a life course approach to healthy aging. This particular network is embedding 9 longitudinal, existing longitudinal cohort studies on aging, as well as developing qualitative approaches to also look at frailty and capability across the life course, to topics like older people's experiences and use of technology, and as well as our own topic, which is the involvement of older people in rural civic society. The different preparatory networks undertook a range of activities, but these included things from identifying data sets for secondary analysis. There are, for example, over 50 data sets from longitudinal cohort studies on aging in the UK, which are quite underutilized and could really benefit from secondary analysis. So the preparatory networks took a look at many of these data sets and their possible utility for their own research. Scoping studies and literature reviews were another activity undertaken by many of the networks, as well as working with research user groups to define a research agenda in various areas, as we did, forming reference panels of older people, putting together away days for their research team members, and to use the research council jargon, organizing sand pits or very free-form brainstorming events for research teams. Now, our own preparatory network aimed at building on the activities of the so-called OPRA, Older People in Rural Areas Network, which is an applied research collaboration that was launched in 2006 between 3 universities in the Southwest. It's led by Bournemouth University and also involves the University of Plymouth and the University of the West of England. And it worked with researchers involved in the OPRA activities across the 3 institutions, who conduct studies across a whole range of different areas on rural aging, ranging from, for example, epidemiology to housing, to narrow down and define and focus a particular research topic within the whole remit of rural aging. So a major part of our task in this preparatory network was to identify an exclusive niche for our work where we could capitalize on the particular strengths of the research team. Just to briefly mention the activities that we conducted in our preparatory network, the area we eventually decided to focus on was on older people's involvement in civic society in rural areas. Older people's community engagement is a topic which is currently a very active area of gerontological research, particularly in regard to looking at older people as social capital. So the main activities that we carried out under our network in this area included conducting an interdisciplinary review of the research activity on older rural people and civic society, including areas like older people's contribution to social and cultural capital, and the barriers and facilitators that exist to social inclusion in rural settings. So right across the various disciplinary literatures. We also consulted with an older people's panel that we developed of rural residents, both in face-to-face meetings as well as virtual or online meetings, in which we were piloting some of the methods that we'll be using in this research, and I'll be talking about that in a while, as well as recruiting the participation of additional academic and non-academic partners. We were advised by the NDA commissioning panel when we submitted our outline proposal to widen the focus, the geographic focus of our proposal beyond the Southwest, and so we thus expanded our focus to include rural areas of Wales. So we added a number of academic partners at the universities of Cardiff and Swansea, where at Cardiff, which houses the Wales Rural Observatory, which has an ongoing surveillance system involving telephone surveys of rural area in Wales, for example. Swansea, which includes a number of experts on rural aging, and also added an international dimension to our research by recruiting a team of rural researchers at the University of Alberta in Canada, where Nora Keating and her colleagues have recently completed a major study of rural aging using census data, telephone surveys of a nationally representative sample of rural older people, as well as case studies in a number of individual communities in rural Canada. And then we recruited a host of non-academic partners with interests in issues having to do with older people in rural areas, both having to do with the overall research program as well as more specific interests having to do with the individual work packages that I'm going to be talking about in a while. So, for example, in addition to having partners like Help the Aged and Age Concern, we also have organizational partners such as Culture Southwest, which is the regional cultural agency for the southwest of England. So we also, the main activity of our preparatory network was then to coordinate and orchestrate all these activities and prepare an interdisciplinary collaborative research project bid to the NDA program, in which, as you will see, we specifically targeted areas that are covered by 3 of the research councils, the ESRC, the AHRC, and the EPSRC. Now, the proposal which we developed is entitled Grey and Pleasant Land, ? An interdisciplinary exploration of connectivity of older people in rural civic society, and I'll be talking about this concept of connectivity as we go along. The principal research questions that we propose to answer in this research are the following. First, how and in what ways are older people connected to civic society in rural settings in England and Wales? Secondly, what is the impact of this connectivity on older people's quality of life in rural areas? How is later life experienced across diverse rural contexts and within subgroups of older people? So not only is not only are rural landscapes changing in southwest England and Wales, but also the human landscape, so to speak, is changing in these areas, with issues like many older people moving to these areas, so there are whole new groups of incomers to these areas, and the landscapes, livelihoods, and lifestyles of older people in these areas are all changing. So this research question relates to these diverse issues. And then finally, in respect to the interdisciplinary nature of this whole research program, we're using this research to determine how novel interdisciplinary approaches can be used to capture and disseminate evidence about older people's participation in and contributions to rural civic society, specifically as a source of rural community capital. Now, in thinking about how to make our proposal authentically interdisciplinary, we looked at quite a bit of, as I mentioned, quite a bit of the literature on the process of conducting interdisciplinary science. And this included a lot of material about how to develop cross-cutting themes in research which could tie together and integrate the different interdisciplinary perspectives. And I came across the concept of the use of what is referred to as a heuristic metaphor. That is a concept that occurs in the different scientific parlances or languages of the participating disciplines, but can be used as a sort of common frame of reference or a springboard for the development of additional concepts and theory building in a way that's not strictly bound by the usages in the participating disciplines. And I hope that'll become clearer as I go along. So in looking for concepts that could serve this purpose in our research, I came across the concept of connectivity. And this seemed to be a good candidate because it occurred across the literatures of the participating disciplines. So, for example, in information and communications technology, connectivity refers to, as you see in these references here, networked communication via technology, and also to digital inclusion. In geography, for example, and areas like transport studies, connectivity is used to refer to physical or spatial inclusion or connections. In geography, and also in geographic information systems modeling, for example, connectivity is used as a basis for these methods. And finally, we seem to be missing out the social science use of the concept of connectivity, but it's very much within the parlance of this literature and refers to things like social inclusion, social and cultural capital, and social networks. Now, what I want to do now is just to walk you through the 7 work packages, or the separate interconnected projects which comprise the program of research on older people's participation in rural civic society, and hopefully demonstrate how we've attempted to weave together the different disciplinary perspectives and methods using this whole concept of connectivity. Work package 1 is, in work package 1, what we are doing is using existing national and other relevant data sets, as well as new primary survey data, to investigate or interrogate these various forms of connectivity. So social connectivity, spatial, technological, and cultural connectivities, and how these different sorts of connectivities relate to civic involvement among people aged 60 and over. So using both secondary analysis of these existing survey data sets, as well as a new survey sample of older persons in 6 rural areas in southwest England and Wales, what we hope to do is to create a common conceptual core for the program and identify additional areas for data collection for each of the other work packages. So this first work package will serve as a foundation or core to inform the other work packages, as you see demonstrated in this graphic. The second work package brings together quite a number of different disciplines, including the social sciences, informatics, and museum and heritage studies. Called the Cultural Third Age, Understanding the Role of Cultural Activities in Active Aging and Intergenerational Relations. We'll use both qualitative methods and survey data to examine the role of cultural and leisure activities in active aging through an intergenerational oral history project that's designed to promote awareness of older people's contributions to community cultural capital in rural areas. So we will use biographical accounts of older people's participation in these activities and primary survey data to address a number of research questions regarding life course patterns of involvement in cultural activities and leisure pursuits, as well as the basis for a community oral history project involving participants in various age groups. We will use these data as the basis for an interactive website. Team members from the computer sciences department here at Plymouth who have experience in developing such a website for a large EU project on oral history will be developing this website for us, as well as a museum exhibition that will be co-created with project participants that will be developed through the Museum Studies program at the University of Bournemouth. Now, transport and mobility are, of course, major factors in older people's ability to be involved in community activities and pursuits, and we will be specifically looking at these factors in Work Package 3, which is being headed up by researchers at the Center for Transport Studies at the University of the West of England, as well as involving the participation of other researchers at Bournemouth and at Swansea. And what Work Package 3 does is aims to increase our understanding of older people's physical or spatial connectivity in relation to their transport and other mobility needs in rural areas, in relation to the larger goal or context of achieving sustainable rural communities. And this work package will use both survey data as well as a number of biographical methods, for example, mobility biographies and phenomenology, to investigate older persons' behaviors and their perceptions and meanings related to this physical connectedness and access to their rural communities. Now, Work Package 4, entitled Film and Performance, Changing Patterns of Connectivity in Rural Place, Space, and Identity, very much involves the input of the arts and the social sciences. And it includes two separate projects which use arts-based tools to examine how older people experience connectivity, a sense of connectedness and inclusion, rural place, and their perceptions of rural space and their own identities in relation to aging. It focuses on the experiences and perceptions of rural living, and also on rural residents whose lifestyles may not fit existing community norms, or who may remain invisible and disconnected to rural communities by virtue of being part of minority groups in these areas. So Project 1 in Work Package 4 is investigating the connectivity or connectedness or exclusion from community life experienced by older gay and lesbian people living in rural settings, while Project 2 is exploring older rural residents' conceptions of the physical, social, and cultural landscapes in which they locate themselves, and it's specifically focusing on issues of memory, place, and their own identity in relationship to the aging experience in these rural areas. And there are a number of arts-based outputs from this work package, which include, among others, a film, a website, and a multimedia-based, book-based publication. Now, Work Package 5, the well-being and welfare of older people in rural areas, is going to specifically look at these issues in relation to older people in low-income households in rural areas. And it will use both primary survey data, including that from Work Package 1, as well as a whole host of ethnographic methods to investigate the more problematic aspects of rural living among older people through looking at the nature and extent of material deprivations experienced by older people in these low-income households, and also the relationship between these kind of material deprivations experienced by older people, their connectivity to rural communities, and also their ability to engage in rural life and be part of social capital. Now, Work Package 6, which Ray Jones, whom you've met in this webcast here at the University of Plymouth, is heading up, is using a number of ICT-based methods to connect stakeholders, a number of stakeholder groups in rural aging. And what this work package is going to do is to build on the involvement of a number of the collaborating stakeholder groups that I mentioned earlier, which we've recruited through our preparatory network activities, including a number of older rural persons panels, both in the Southwest and in Wales, the non-academic partner organizations I mentioned, as well as a number of international academic experts in rural aging, whom we've also recruited. And what this work package will do is to explore these stakeholders' views on quality of life issues for older rural people. So this will form one strand of our dissemination strategy for our program of research by eliciting these stakeholders' views on the findings from the various work packages as they're developing, and getting their feedback on these emerging findings, as well as using their own networks to disseminate these findings. So the project will specifically use a number of web-based computer methods, including things like webcasts the webcasts that we're using now, video conferencing and chat rooms, to enable connectivity, if you will, among these various groups, and to also, using surveys, investigate, and surveys and other methods, investigate older rural people's use of and experiences of communication technology. And how Work Package 6 will provide this kind of input and feedback from and to the different work packages is illustrated in this graphic, which you see here. And then the final work package, Work Package 7, entitled Managing Interdisciplinary Research Connectivity, what we're doing is using this 7th work package as an overarching management work package for the entire research program in order to coordinate and synthesize the wide range of individual work package findings into a coherent, hopefully coherent overall account of older people's involvement in rural civic society. And we're also using this work package to investigate, if you will, how we are operationalizing or doing the process of interdisciplinary research. There's a lot of literature to indicate that although much lip service is paid to the process of doing this kind of research, there's not a lot of attention that's being paid to, particularly in UK Research Council funded research, to how this is explicitly done, and to actually use findings about how this is done in various programs of research in the UK to improve this process or build upon this process. So what we're going to do is, among other things, capture the proceedings from the interdisciplinary team meetings and use various qualitative methods to analyze these proceedings and create a series of focused reports from these meetings, which will then be posted on a researchers only site on the project website. And the various research team members can log into these, and they will be required to respond to a series of increasingly focused research questions having to do with their own work packages, findings and views about connectivity and other key issues. So we'll be using this these series of reports to, in an iterative way, to develop additional concepts and theory building about connectivity, social capital, how this relates to social capital, and many of the other key concepts in this program of research in a kind of a feedback loop. And the work packages and disciplines will also be contributing to a program web-based knowledge management system, which you may be familiar with in terms of the concept of wiki, which is used in all kinds of program development as a basis, again, for developing interdisciplinary theory within the program. And this last graphic illustrates how we propose that work package 7 both feeds back into and captures the findings from the various work packages, as well as creating a feedback loop among the various work packages and developing synergy among them. So that's basically what the program's about, and we have, I think, about 15 minutes to respond to any questions that you may have.
Just as a matter of housekeeping, what we'll do is we'll go off air here for a minute, for 5 minutes. We'll put some music on while you think of your questions and post your comments in the chat room, and then Catherine will come back here in about 5 minutes time to respond to your comments and questions. So we'll turn the sound off, put some music on, and let's have your questions and comments, please.
Oh, hello. We're back, and there seems to be one question, which is from Rashid, who would like to know.
Rashid's from the University of Alberta, by the way.
Oh, yes, right. Who's from the University of Alberta, and Rashid is interested in knowing who will be doing the filming and recording in Work Package 4, and is it the participants themselves? The film itself will be based on the life story accounts of the gay and lesbian participants in the study, and they will work with the filmmaker to develop the script for the film. There's a professional filmmaker whose films have won several national awards, actually, who will be involved in making the film for Work Package 4. Any other questions? Chris Hanks has just asked a question about aspects of physical and spatial inclusion and connections, and wondered if I could elaborate on that a bit more. This is in reference to Work Package 3, and this is a very novel and innovative approach to the topic of physical inclusion and connectedness. And we'll be dealing with more traditional approaches having to do with older people's transport needs and their preferences, and for example, looking at the extent to which family members and other social networks help them in meeting these needs, and issues like decisions to give up driving, for example, or to carry on driving, and the kinds of factors that influence those sorts of decisions. But it will also use other methods, including more phenomenologically based approaches, to look at the whole issue of people's views of their connectedness to community life in ways that might not involve their physically getting from one place to another. So, for example, to what extent can they be connected, so to speak, to aspects of community life that are important to them in other ways? For example, through information and communication technology, or in other ways that make them feel connected and part of community life. So there's a very exploratory aspect to this particular work package, and looking at how older people view social inclusion and connectedness in terms of physically being able to get somewhere or not. I hope that answers the question.
Nothing else much to do at the moment. So,
any other questions?
Les has any comments from Bournemouth? Well, at least from Bournemouth, isn't he, Les?
Yes, they're all working on that. Perhaps
here we are, from Emmanuel.
Okay.
So what specific benefits do elderly people will come of the project, and what is its time frame for these to become a reality?
Okay. Emmanuel Feature has asked what the specific benefits to elderly people will be from the project, and what is the time frame for these benefits to become a reality. What we've tried to do in this project is to really take to use a positive aging paradigm to look at older people's contributions or potential contributions to community life in rural areas. A lot of the research that's been done to date on older people in rural areas has really had quite a problem-based focus. And of course, while it's very important to get a handle on the factors that lead to social exclusion of older people in rural areas, we are taking an approach which is informed by a positive look at how older people can be viewed as community assets. And a lot of the outputs from this program of research, other than in addition to being sort of standard research outputs in terms of academic articles and other outputs of that nature, are, as you see, outputs which hope to maximize the dissemination of this work through, say, film, media-based projects, and other arts-based projects that can disseminate these findings to a very wide audience and in novel ways.
I've got a question from Penny as well.
Okay.
Do you have a specific plan for reaching older people in rural areas who have not yet embraced technology and maybe teaching them about the benefits? I mean,
what would you like to answer that?
Okay. Well,
Is that all right?
Well, okay, yeah. I mean, the technology bit really is Penny is really only in the sixth work package. So, well, it pops up here and there, but the engagement with the sort of some of the stakeholders and so on is in only really in that sixth work package. We will of course still be having face-to-face meetings with our older people's panels. I mean, perhaps Catherine might want to say a bit more about that. I mean, the older people's panels.
We are working with, as I had mentioned, a couple of older people's reference panels with members from the Southwest, from the various Southwest older people's forums, as well as through a network of older people in rural Wales. And we're looking for opportunities to connect with perhaps other older people's reference groups in rural areas, and technology, including some of the methods involved in Work Package 6, will be key to connecting up these groups.
But the short answer to your question, Penny, is no. We're not planning on trying to teach older people in rural areas who don't have access to technologies about their use. I think that actually some of the other NDA projects might be addressing that. There's certainly some more of a Dundee thing, isn't it, really?
Yes, and that's exactly what's happening. If you look at the New Dynamics of Aging website, which I had mentioned earlier, and for which you should have the web address, if you look at the preparatory networks, several of them are addressing just this issue.
We don't have any more questions just at the moment. It's just coming up to 4 o'clock, so unless anybody wants to get a last quick question in. Oh, here we are. This one from Chris Hanks. Are you making any distinction between native peoples from the Southwest and the incomers?
People will be telling us about whether or not they have lived in these particular communities say their whole life long, or are, say, relative incomers to the areas. And this is an important issue, as you may be aware, all over rural areas in the UK, especially in the southwest, with an increasing number of older people retiring to the southwest, and the kind of, in some cases, tensions between the lifestyles and interests of people who have lived in these communities for quite a long time or all their lives, and people who are relative newcomers, is something that provides part of the context and backdrop for this research.
Will that just be in the southwest, or also in the Wales and the Canadian connections?
It will be throughout the research program.
I think we've reached 4 o'clock, so I think it's time to say goodbye.
Yes, well, thank you all very much for tuning in, and for your questions and your interest. And you can contact me at any point if you have further questions about the research program. Thank you very much.